Hey everyone. So I have gathered all of the supplies that I need to make my first anthotype, and this first two that I make are just going to be test prints. So I'm going to put one taped up to my window, which does get a lot of sunlight, and test that one out and see how it goes. And the other one I'm going to put outside. And so I won't show you on this video what they look like at the end. I'll probably just post pictures and show you what both prints look like. And then I'll post an image of the finished anthotype once I have my times down. So this is probably going to be something that it will be easier for you to do like in a kitchen with a counter, but I'm going to try to do it all on my desk at least today. So I have a container to mix my, I'm using like a vegetable pigment, not pigment, but like I'm using a vegetable derivative, there's the word I'm looking for. And notice how this is just an old pasta jar. I am not using like a nice mixing bowl from my kitchen. I could if I wanted to. And honestly, this is, again, it's a vegetable. It's spirulina. And so people eat this. It's a supplement. So I could easily mix this in a kitchen bowl. But I just want to be extra safe. And I'm going to mix it in this old container. Then I can store it. I can put a lid on it, put it in the fridge, and keep using it for more prints. So obviously, I've chosen to do this spirulina, and this is actually something I bought a long time ago to do exactly this process, an anthotype process, and I just never did it. So this is a perfect opportunity. And this is powdered already. It's a very fine powder. You can't see it. So I'm not going to strain this, but if I was going to strain it, I would get like a mesh strainer, or I would use something like this. So this is an old reusable bag for like getting vegetables at the grocery store, and it's a pretty fine fabric. I think that water would go through it really easily, but large particles would not. So if I had like ground up, flower petals or something instead of the spirulina and it was chunky, this would be really good for straining it. I would need another container. So I would need to pour from one container through this into another container. But this is so fine, I think it would just go through anything. It would go through the fabric. So there's no point in straining it. And then I have isopropyl alcohol, so the rubbing alcohol. And you can use distilled water, but from everything that I've read, it's better to use the alcohol. So I'm going to go ahead and use this. I have a cheap large brush here for painting it onto my paper. And I have watercolor paper. So again, this is just like a cheap pad. It's not like really high quality watercolor paper. But watercolor paper, as you guys saw, tends to hold up fairly well. So it's better to do prints like the gum printing that we did or these anthotypes on this type of paper because it is a heavier paper and it's designed to get really wet. I have taken apart a frame. I'll put it back together. I just took the back off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these pieces of coated paper. I need to cut it down a little bit. And I'm going to sandwich it in here and put the back on. And then I'm just going to put this whole thing outside when I'm done with that. And what I'm going to do, and I've sandwiched my watercolor paper in there, so I'm actually going to put this strip of black in. And I'm hoping that it won't be so tight that I can't like pull it up every couple hours to see how my exposure times change, or to see how the exposure changes. So we're going to set this aside. And I'm going to get a piece of paper ready. And then we are going to mix the spirulina. So I think I'm going to put a pretty decent amount in here. And rubbing alcohol. If you can't get rubbing alcohol, because I know rubbing alcohol is precious, try and get distilled water. And if you can't get distilled water, you can just use ordinary water. So this is pretty thick. It's not like a paste, but there's a lot of spirulina in there that isn't dissolved. So I'm just going to go for it. I might have to adjust how much alcohol there is in this mixture, but we're going to do a couple of test prints first. And I'm going to do 2 coats as well, because again, I was reading that 2 coats tends to give a brighter color to the finished print. And another positive with using the rubbing alcohol is that this is going to dry pretty fast, because rubbing alcohol tends to evaporate fairly quickly. So just like with your gum prints, you want to go in both directions. And I know this is not going to be very sensitive to light, so I'm doing this with my curtains open. There's a lot of light in this room. I'm not overly concerned. So while that piece dries, I'm going to coat a second piece. So I recommend that you put the coated pieces of paper out for exposure starting around 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. And again, it's going to depend on your exposure times. If you need days of exposure, I wouldn't really worry about when you pop it outside. Just maybe go back and check it once a day around the same time of day. But if you find that you only need a couple of hours of exposure, you really want to maximize that time by getting your print out there when the sun is really strong. So I do recommend that you put your prints outside sort of earlier on in the day, so you get that noontime sun. And I just messed this print up. You could definitely use a blow dryer on these, a hair dryer, just like we did when we did our gum prints, if you want to speed this process up. Okay, so I didn't end up doing a second coat on this one because it was already really dark. So it is pretty much dry. I would normally leave this to dry a little bit longer, but I am going to put it into this frame. So I just need to either cut it down or fold it a little bit. So right now, a lot of the spirulina is kind of flaking off. So I don't know if it just didn't dissolve long enough in the alcohol, or if it just wasn't the best choice for something to use. But we're going to go with it. All right, so right now, I'm just trying to position it in this frame. Okay. So I want to make sure that I lock the little tabs on the back of the frame down, because I want there to be a lot of pressure so that that paper stays pressed up against that glass. And I can pull this out as long as I'm careful. So this one I'm just going to go put outside, and I think I'm going to check this and pull the tab up further every hour and just see how it goes. And then let's check the other piece of paper. The other piece is still really wet. So I'm going to put this one in my window, and I'm just rubbing off the excess spirulina. It's still pretty dark. So I'm just going to tape the top and the bottom to the window, and probably this side I'm just going to use like masking tape. Don't use like duct tape or something, or you're going to get sticky stuff all over your window until the end of time. So I'm going to just use some blue or tan masking tape, and then every 2 hours I'll pull this tab out. And that's it. I'll post the results and let you guys know how it goes.